One of the best feelings in chess is successfully sacrificing your piece or pieces to gain an advantage or to checkmate your opponent. What you're about to see are two different games where I sacrificed my pieces against significantly higher rated opponents. And this was kind of a nice moment for me. Full story, maybe a little bit TMI, but I was getting non-stop invites. These people were incessantly inviting me to play games every time I logged into the chess.com app. And one day I was sitting on the toilet and decided to oblige and accept a couple of their games. And what you're about to see is what happened. And just to clarify, I'm not about to show you footage of me on the toilet. I'm about to show you a recap of those two games. So for game number one, we are playing Royal Lopez, who you can see on the screen up there is 1899, but that's after we played. So he was actually rated above 1900 when we played this game. And he starts off with 1d4. And my response to d4 is normally to play knight f6 and usually a King's Indian defense. But the one thing I've noticed through a few extra games of playing the King's Indian defense is that it allows the opponent to play d4, c4, and e4 sometimes. And that's bad because or it's unnatural for me to play because that allows white to take a big center, and that's exactly what happens in this game. You see c4 come, and you see e4 come. And at this point, they have a trio of pawns controlling all these important central squares. And for here, I go ahead and castle and try to play this break c5 to break up this trio. And what ends up happening is I was trying to open this up, right? But white was smart. To his credit, he decided to close the position. And what this does is that because I allowed him to take those three pawns in the center, he just said, thanks for the space, good luck kicking me out. And what ends up happening is there's just a lot of shuffling. You know, one trade here, a pin, or almost a pin, and just another trade here. And then after that, I tried to say, okay, let me try to break open the center one more time, because who can resist en passant? You know, everyone under 1,000 who follows all the chess memes, they see the opportunity to en passant, they execute it. And I figured if he en passants, I can take with my f pawn and open up the f file to have some indirect pressure on the queen. And unfortunately, white, who being a 1900 player, realized, okay, I will really make it hard for you to transfer anything over to the king side and just leave it at a closed position. So again, white is playing it smart, just keeping position, keeping a huge pawn chain, taking more and more space in my territory. And what ends up happening is just a lot of slow play, a few slow pawn moves, and shuffling around. And you can see what's happening slowly is that white is gearing up for a big attack on the queen side, because there's so much tension that when the queen side opens up, white will have two rooks and a queen, well, and a knight, all coming down the queen side to infiltrate. And I was trying to prepare for this, and so I said maybe I will try to counterattack on the king side, see whose is faster. And my idea was to again try and open up that f file, and white did not oblige. Instead, white jumped in with a knight and starting that infiltration. And I said, okay, I will continue with pushing my f pawn. And because what do you do when you have a pawn with a rook behind it and you have no other play anywhere else on the board? You just push your pawn that's supported by your rook. And he backs up, and I said, let's keep this going, let's keep this momentum going forward. If he takes, then we have an open king, and you know, we can start bringing in more pieces, and it'll be very, very good for black. But that doesn't happen. Instead, white plays a disastrous move, g4. And maybe he was thinking, look, I have so much space, let's just continue grabbing space. But or maybe he was thinking, oh, like, you've already advanced your pawn to f3, you can't en passant me because you're not on f4. But whatever the reasoning was, it was actually a blunder, because what should have happened next is I should have come in and said, thank you for letting me in, because now I can come in to queen h4 with threats on the h pawn and then gobbling up g pawn and all sorts of stuff to ultimately hopefully deliver mate, or at least have some big attack. Unfortunately, I missed that. I did not come in with queen h4. Instead, I jumped in with knight f6, which was just blocking the queen from ever getting there. But keep that move in mind in the future, because what you see next is that the queen shuffles, the rook comes up, and then white finally says it's time, we're opening up the queen side. And I realized, white has been delivering body blow, body blow, body blow after one after another. And I figured, look, this is about to come crashing down. So my natural response was, let's try and deliver a knockout punch. That's my only hope now. And my definition of a knockout punch is this sacrifice knight g4. And my idea here is that if takes, I finally play queen h4, and I can come in with a series of checks and deliver mate, because this is going to be a back rank mate, because this bishop's still standing here blocking the king from moving around. And my opponent happily accepts the knight, which the computer thinks is a mistake. And the key to mistakes in chess, even if a chess engine thinks that something is a mistake, sometimes that mistake is only bad for that player that played it if the opponent finds very, very accurate play. And in this instance, there's only one move to keep advantage after queen h4. So let's take a second here, because here's what's going to happen. I'm actually going to play the rest of the game as is, and then back up and let you see if you can find a way to save it for white. So my opponent plays queen d1, I play check, king slides over, check, and exactly what I mentioned, it's a mate with queen on g1, because the pawn becomes the hero. The knight sacrificed itself for the pawn to be the hero, supporting in the checkmate. But if we back up to this position, I'll go ahead and pause the video for a second, just so you can try and find a saving move for white. I'll take a sip of water. Just kidding, it's empty. And so the move is actually queen to d3, because it is helping protect this very important f1 square, so that when I go queen takes g4, king slides over, and continues so on, when I try to deliver mate, it is no longer mate, because the queen can jump in here, and if I take, well, I'm just down that knight that I sacrificed, and white is totally fine. Like I said, they're about to push and or take and really open up the queen side, which they have loaded up with their rooks already. So that's why this was so dangerous. But ultimately, my opponent did not have the most accurate play, and my knight sacrifice did lead to checkmate. So I was very proud of this moment. My opponent actually spent a full 2.5 minutes. He went from 3 minutes and 42 seconds to 1 minute and 13 looking for this move, and he was not able to find it. So sacrificing the knight definitely threw him for a loop and led to a win. So that's a huge success in my books. So this next game is a little bit shorter, but again, we're playing someone rated 1700, so much higher rated than I am. And you can see that I'm playing with white this time. I play e4, and my opponent plays the French defense. So when he plays d5, white normally has 3 different options. They can push, they can exchange, or they can try and protect their e4 pawn. In the past, I always like to play the advanced variation, but the idea here is just to gobble up and take space in black's territory, similar to what my opponent did in the last game. But I'm not a 1900 rated player, and I don't always know how to play in those closed positions. So this time I figured, let me try and play the exchange variation and just make normal developing moves. No theory, no nothing involved, just principle chess. And I develop my knight, he pins it, I unpin, we develop pieces, he gives this check, I accidentally allow, and I accidentally repin my knight, so he takes, I take back, and what ultimately happens is he comes in, I drop a pawn on accident, and I freaked out because I said, I'm down a pawn, it looks like black has infiltrated, even though in reality everything's defended, in fact multiple times. But I started freaking out, thinking, oh boy, this is dangerous for white. So I jumped the knight forward, which he attacks, and at this point I said, okay, do I want to save my knight, or do I want to spaz out and do something crazy? So I actually sacrificed the bishop. I said, look, let's do something Greek gift-esque and attract the king out so we can attack it. And that's exactly what happens. And king comes out, And before I continue, when you look at the position before, knight, all these pieces are pretty well developed, with the exception of the a rook. But I can very quickly flick in rook b1 and use the semi-open file here. And if you look at black, their pieces are totally inactive. All the queenside pieces are just totally gone. Still on the 8th rank, and the one piece that's not on the 8th rank is kind of trapped in white's territory, trying to hit things that are already defended. So I really didn't need to panic, but this bishop sacrifice ended up being a useful sacrifice, because as the king came out, I gave a check on h5 and ultimately saw a perfect chance for a perpetual. And so I ultimately, right here, when he moved to king h8, I saw this perpetual, but I also saw maybe a chance for a checkmate. And I was trying to calculate this. If I went knight g6, what would happen? And it's forced to go king h7, but I couldn't figure out a way to move my queen and create some sort of threat or have a rook lift in time. So I couldn't calculate it quickly enough, and I just settled for the perpetual. But in reality, after some review with the computer, I could have jumped in, and at some point either I would win the queen, because when king comes out, knight jumps in for another check. Queen either sacrifices or at some point moves, and it's like a long line, but at some point the white queen can actually just start gobbling up these sitting ducks over here. So definitely still a winning position for white, but ultimately I was on the toilet. My business was finished, so I had to get out, and I settled for this perpetual, which, by the way, was the first perpetual I've ever forced. So definitely still a step forward for me. I would consider a step forward to kind of see a perpetual and go for it. So what was the whole point of sharing these two games? My theme or message that I want to convey is that when you play higher rated players, it's okay to be nervous, but it's also okay to play aggressive or take calculated risks, because ultimately, if you in life too, if you don't go for something because you're afraid of what you're facing, sometimes it's more the fear that hinders the performance than your opponent or the challenge in front of you. So I just want to share these couple of games because I think they're just fun games where I was able to successfully pull off some sacrifices, but also just to encourage you guys to be aggressive and play good chess no matter what the circumstances. With that, hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please hit the like button below and subscribe as well. And if you have a game where you successfully sacrificed a piece, please leave a link to it down in the comments below, and I'll try my best to get to every single one.